Because of my wife's infidelity, I was banned from every cinema in the city. Now I'll tell you how it happened, a quiet unraveling I didn't see coming until it was too late. I stood in our apartment that evening, keys still in hand, jacket half off, when the first hint landed, a casual remark from a neighbor that turned my world sideways. I'm Owen, 38, steady, the kind who notices details others miss, who keeps life even, predictable. Sarah's different, secretive, cool, always holding something back. 11 years married, settled into the city high-rise where lights flicker through glass and lives stack close. We'd been solid once, her mystery pulling me in, my balance keeping us straight, but lately she'd drifted, her evenings longer, her explanations shorter. That band, that end, it began with a single thread, one I'd tug until it all came loose, a story I'd tell now, voice steady, eyes clear, a memory that lingers but doesn't break me. It was a Thursday, late October, air crisp outside, when I came home from work, the elevator humming as it climbed to our floor. Sarah was out, said she'd be at a friend's, watching a movie downtown, and I didn't question it, not then. I'd been at my desk all day. Numbers, reports, the usual grind, when Jim, our neighbor 2 doors down, caught me in the hall, his trash bag swinging as he nodded hello. He mentioned it offhand, said he'd seen Sarah last week at the Regal, the old theater on 5th, with her brother, laughing as they bought tickets. My chest tightened, not fast, just firm, because Sarah doesn't have a brother, never did, no siblings at all. I kept my face still, thanked him, casual, unlocking the door, stepping inside, my mind already turning, steady but sharp, over what he'd said. I didn't sit, just stood in the living room, keys on the counter, jacket still on, letting it settle. Jim's words stuck, her brother, the Regal, a lie she hadn't told me yet, and I felt the first stir, not panic, just unease, a ripple I couldn't smooth out. 11 years, her quiet glances, my steady trust, and now this, a crack I hadn't looked for. I moved, not rushed, just deliberate, to her desk, a cluttered corner she used for bills, her papers always a mess. I flipped through, not tearing, just searching, finding ticket stubs, 3 of them, tucked under a stack of envelopes, Regal Cinema, different dates, past 2 months. My stomach shifted, not loud, just sure, as I held them, dates lining up with her late nights, her excuses about friends, errands, anything but this. Shock crept in, not wild, just there, a truth I hadn't wanted to see. I didn't stop, kept going, steady as ever, checking her coat pockets, her bag by the door, places she might have left a trace. Nothing else turned up, no names, no notes, just those stubs, plain and damning, a pattern I couldn't ignore. I sat, chair creaking, stubs in hand, picturing it, Sarah at the Regal, not alone, not with a brother she didn't have, but someone, a shadow I didn't know. Anger flickered, not a shout, just firm, at her hiding this, at Jim's casual drop, at my missing it. I'd been balanced, always balanced, watching her drift, trusting her cool distance, but now it tilted, a lens shifting, showing me what I'd overlooked. Sadness slipped in, not deep, just faint, an ache for what we'd been, her mystery a pull I'd followed too long. I didn't toss them, just set them down, my breathing even, my resolve hardening, a step I'd take to find out more. She came home past 10, keys rattling, her steps light on the hardwood, calling out a quick hello, her voice smooth, too smooth, as she shed her coat, hung it by the door. I stayed where I was, living room chair, stubs hidden in my pocket, watching her move to the kitchen, her hair catching the light as she grabbed a glass. She didn't notice, not yet, just talked about her night, a movie with Lisa, her tone easy, practiced. I didn't interrupt, just listened, steady and silent, letting her build it, letting the air grow heavy. 11 years, her secrets, my trust, and she didn't love me anymore, not the way I'd thought, chasing something else, keeping me in the dark. My jaw tightened, not loud, just sure, as I waited, knowing I'd dig, knowing I'd see, a truth I'd chase, calm but clear. That's when it began, where the man I'd been started to shift, a steady slide I couldn't halt. I didn't confront her, not then, just sat, the stubs a secret I'd hold, the apartment a space I'd sift through. Sarah, my Sarah, had let someone in, regular nights at the Regal, a former classmate I'd soon name, and I'd missed it, observant but blind. I'd find out, not fast, not reckless, but careful, my way, following the traces she'd left, a path I'd walk with eyes open, step by step, until I had it all, a ban I'd earn, a story I'd tell, one that started here, with a lie I'd never forget. I carried those ticket stubs in my pocket through the next day, 3 small pieces of cardstock, their edges worn, a secret I'd tucked away as the apartment stood quiet around me, sunlight slanting through the blinds onto the hardwood. Sarah had left early, headed to work, her goodbye a quick wave. That morning, Jim's words, her brother at the Regal, mixed with those stubs, a puzzle I couldn't leave alone, and I knew I'd dig, not fast, not loud, but careful, my way, until I had it all. I started in the kitchen, coffee cooling on the counter, then I saw she'd forgotten her bag, my hands steady as I moved to her bag, left by the door from last night. I didn't rush, just unzipped it, sifting through keys, receipts, a pen, until I found her phone, slipped into a side pocket, screen dark. She'd never locked it, trusted my calm, my not prying, and I powered it on, my thumb steady, my chest tight, not sharp, just firm as it lit up. I scrolled, not tearing, just looking past texts with Lisa, her boss, until I hit a name, Ryan, no last name, messages stretching back 2 months. Regal, 7 tomorrow, 1 red, then, last night was fun, and, same seat? Short, casual, a rhythm I couldn't miss. My stomach sank, not sudden, just deep shock settling in, not wild, just there, as I saw it clear, Ryan, someone she'd met regular at the cinema, not a brother, not a friend, a thread she'd kept from me. I didn't stop, kept going, steady as ever, reading on, dates lining up with those stubs, her late nights, her excuses about movies with Lisa. Anger flickered, not a yell, just firm, at her hiding this, at her planning it, at my missing it all along. I'd been balanced, always balanced, trusting her cool distance, her secretive edge, but now it sharpened, a truth I couldn't dodge. I set the phone down, not hard, just sure, leaving it as I'd found it, my hands calm, my mind racing, not loud, just steady, over who Ryan was, what he meant. 11 years, her glances, my faith, and she didn't love me, not anymore, chasing something with him, keeping me out. Sadness crept in, not heavy, just faint, an ache for what I thought we had, her mystery a draw I'd misread. I moved, not fast, just deliberate, to her desk again, flipping through papers, drawers, anything she might have left. A cinema schedule, Regals, folded small, slipped out from under a stack, dates circled, 2 months back, matching her texts. My jaw tightened, not sharp, just certain, as I held it, seeing the pattern, regular screenings, her with Ryan, not random, not one-off, but steady, planned. I sat, chair creaking, schedule in hand, picturing it, Sarah at the Regal, dark seats, his shadow beside her, nostalgia her excuse, a pull she'd followed. Shock grew, not wild, just heavy, a wave I couldn't push back, knowing she'd done this, kept it close, thought I'd stay blind. Anger burned, not a shout, just deep, at her secrecy, her callousness, her letting him in while I waited here, steady and fooled. I didn't pause, kept searching, my hands firm, checking her coat again, her shelves, until I found a photo, tucked in a book she'd left out, a Polaroid from years back, Sarah, younger, smiling, next to a guy tall, dark hair, familiar grin labeled Ryan 05 in her tight script. My chest froze, not fast, just still, shock flaring, not loud, just there, as I recognized him, a former classmate, a name from her past, not some stranger but a ghost she'd pulled back. Sadness deepened, not wild, just steady, for what it meant, her past allure, her present with me not enough. I'd been observant, always observant, watching her drift, trusting her cool reserve, but now it broke open, a lens I couldn't unsee. Anger steadied, not a roar, just firm, at her keeping this, at her chasing him, at her thinking I'd never know. I stood, not rushed, just sure, photo in hand, moving to the window, the city sprawling out, high-rise lights a faint glow against the day. She'd met him regular, 2 months, cinema seats, her nostalgia a hook, and I'd missed it, balanced but blind, her lies piling up. I didn't toss it, just slipped it with the stubs, my breathing even, my resolve hardening, not loud, just there, a step I'd take to confirm it, to face it. That afternoon, I waited a steady, not restless, until her phone rang, left on the counter, a call I didn't answer but heard, voicemail clicking on, Ryan's voice low, missed you at the Regal last night, same time tomorrow? My stomach turned, not fast, just deep, anger flaring, not wild, just firm, at his ease, her routine, their secret laid bare. I sat, coffee cold, phone silent, letting it settle, the twist locking it in, Ryan, her classmate, 2 months at the Regal, her voice when she'd lied about Lisa last night. Shock swelled, not loud, just heavy, a truth I couldn't turn from, her texts, her photo, his call painting it stark. Anger burned, not a yell, just steady, at her callousness, her secrecy, her thinking I'd stay in the dark. Sadness lingered, not breaking, just there, an ache for what we'd lost, her mystery a lie, her choice a mark I'd carry. I didn't break, just stayed, my hands calm, my mind set, not fast, not reckless, but sure, a path I'd follow, eyes open, to what came next. That's when I knew, sitting there, the city a hum beyond, the man I'd been was slipping, a steady shift I couldn't stop. I didn't confront, not yet, it just sat, the photo, stubs, his voice a proof I'd hold, the apartment a space I'd reclaim. My Sarah, had let Ryan in, 2 months at the Regal, her past a pull she'd chased, and I'd missed it, observant but lost. I'd trace it, not rushed, but careful, my way. I waited for Sarah that night with the photo, ticket stubs, and Ryan's voicemail tucked in my pocket, their presence a steady pressure I couldn't dismiss as the apartment lay quiet around me, the kitchen lamp casting a soft glow over the hardwood, city lights pulsing faintly beyond the glass. She'd walk through soon, her routine a thin shield, and I stood by the counter, hands resting on the edge, coffee long cold, sensing the moment had arrived, deliberate and certain, to face her, to let the truth pour out, sharp and unguarded. She arrived past 10, keys clinking, steps quick on the floor, offering a brief hello, her voice cool and clipped, as she dropped her bag and hung her coat near the door. I stayed put, gaze fixed, as she stepped into the kitchen, hair catching the light, hands reaching for a glass like nothing had shifted. She didn't notice at first, just launched into a tale about her day, tone smooth and practiced until her eyes met mine, then slid to the counter where the photo and stubs sat, Ryan's younger face staring up. Her words cut off, expression tightening, a fracture she couldn't conceal, the glass clinking as she set it down, fingers stiff against it, lingering. I held my silence, watching her absorb it, letting the air thicken, chest heavy with the facts I'd gathered. 11 years of guarded glances and steady faith, and she'd slipped away, 2 months at the Regal with him, her past allure she'd followed, keeping me unaware. Shock hung there from earlier finds, texts, his voice, but anger surged now, fierce and unyielding, at her secrecy, her indifference, her assumption I'd remain in the dark. I stepped closer, measured, purposeful, boots barely audible, hands relaxed, the photo a signal she couldn't sidestep. She glanced up, eyes narrowing, warmth fading, a barrier I'd dismantle, resolute and calm. Her voice broke through, soft, faltering, claiming it was a misunderstanding, just a friend, a casual movie, nothing serious. I stayed firm, pulled the stubs from my pocket, fanning them out, dates stark against the wood, 2 months of deception she couldn't reshape. Anger flared, hot and immediate, at her evasion, her detached denial, and I asked, tone flat, piercing, how long it had been, who he was, pinning her with my stare, unwavering. She blinked, hands clutching the counter, knuckles whitening, silence stretching, an admission she wouldn't voice, her face paling as I held her there, refusing to let her escape. Shock pulsed, relentless, at her standing there, still lying, her betrayal a burden I'd shouldered alone. She stiffened, voice lifting, admitting it was Ryan, a classmate from years back, just reconnecting, old emotions stirring, nothing lasting. My stomach twisted, sick and tight, at her reasoning, nostalgia a weak justification, her coldness a jolt I couldn't shake off. She pressed on, tone edged, firm, saying she'd felt trapped, needed this, a glimpse of who she'd been before us. Anger roared, unshakable, at her pinning it on me, her chasing him, her shredding our years with that excuse. I closed the distance, steps slow, deliberate, shadow falling across her, hands curling into fists, controlled, contained anger spilling out raw as I demanded why, voice low, trembling, needing her to own it, to face the choice she'd made. She dropped her gaze, hands unsteady, then looked up, stare icy, saying she hadn't meant it to grow, just screenings that drew her back, Ryan a spark absent with me. My chest seized, breath halting, shock crashing, overwhelming, at her confession, her lack of love, her choosing him for 2 months. Sadness flooded, piercing, for what we'd lost, her mystery a sham, her decision a divide I couldn't cross. I let it loose, anger erupting, harsh, telling her she'd lied, concealed it, welcomed him into our life, voice rising, jagged, at her deceit, her belief I'd stay oblivious, her tearing us apart without care. Then her twist landed, she shook her head, quick, dismissive, claiming it was finished, she hadn't seen him recently, wanted me back, voice cracking, a plea I hadn't foreseen. My hands shook, anger surging, searing, at her boldness, her thinking she could rewind it, her 2 months a secret she'd discard now. Shock gripped me, unrelenting, at her nerve, her cool reversal, her standing there asking for us after this. I stepped back, resolute, boots thudding softly, voice dropping, cold, saying no, it was done, she'd lost me, her chance gone. Sadness swelled, persistent, for what it revealed, her past a draw she'd chosen, her life with me a lie I'd held too long. I turned purposefully to the window, city lights sprawling out, floors of lives I'd soon leave behind, hands steadying, open, needing space, the air dense with her words, her plea, her betrayal. She remained, motionless, glass untouched, excuse a thread I'd sever, coldness a fortress I'd met. Shock lingered, anger burned, sadness settled, a storm I carried, fractured yet firm. I didn't collapse, stood tall, her voice an echo, her 2 months a mark I'd outlast. Sarah had let Ryan in, chased nostalgia, thought I'd stay deceived, and I'd met it unfiltered, a step I'd take, clear-eyed, into what followed, a story carved here, with a truth I'd never release. I carried Sarah's plea through the morning after, her voice a faint echo in the quiet apartment. She'd left for work, her goodbye a quick nod, leaving me alone in the high-rise, city lights fading into day beyond the glass. 11 years of trust had frayed, her cool exterior a lie, her 2 months with Ryan a betrayal I'd faced, and I'd settled on a response, deliberate and certain, to strike back. Observant as ever, I'd tracked her drift, uncovered her secret, and now I'd turn it against her, her affair a public mark she couldn't erase, taking it into my own hands, steady and resolute. The plan sharp and fast, clear, precise, centered on the Regal Cinema, her refuge with him, a place I'd reclaim tonight. I'd caught a detail weeks back, Jim mentioning a projector glitch, a friend on staff who'd complained, so I moved to the living room, flipping through my phone for his number. I called voice level, casual, asking if his contact still worked there, if he could arrange a quiet entry. Jim agreed, no questions, gave me Tim's name, a line to reach him. I dialed, explaining short, a photo, the screen, me there, one night. Tim paused, a voice rough, then said he'd unlocked the booth, oh Jim, could cover it during a late show. I thanked him, calm, focused, knowing Sarah and Ryan would be there, her pattern etched from those stubs. I prepared, hands firm, grabbing my laptop, pulling the photo from her book, scanning it clean, Sarah and Ryan, young and smiling, Ryan 05 in her tight script. I typed the caption, I am filing for divorce, you have nothing else, simple, direct, leaving no doubt, saving it to a drive, my chest tight, resolute as I pocketed it, a move I'd make myself. Anger simmered unyielding at her secrecy, her nostalgia excuse, her thinking I'd stay quiet. I'd seen her balanced, watchful, her cool detachment, her lies, and now I'd show it, letting the Regal screen tell what she'd done. Sadness lingered, an ache for what we'd lost, her past a draw she'd chosen over me, but I set it aside, focus locked, ready to act. That night, Friday, I left steady, not rushed, driving to the Regal, the city alive beyond the windshield, lights glinting off glass towers. Sarah had said she'd be out movies with a friend, her voice smooth, her lie familiar, and I knew she'd be there, Ryan beside her, seats they'd held for 2 months. I parked, hands calm, slipping into the cinema, ticket in hand, Tim nodding me through, his eyes averted as he led me up backstairs to the projection booth, small and dim, equipment humming. Shock pulsed from her betrayal, but anger drove me fierce at her callousness, her hidden nights, her thinking I'd let it slide. I didn't falter, just waited, drive ready, watching the screen below, the film rolling, seats filling, Sarah's silhouette there, Ryan's too. I acted steady, deliberate, sliding the in as Tim stepped out, my hands firm on the controls, timing it mid-movie, lights dim, crowd hushed. I clicked, photo loading, screen flickering, Sarah and Ryan, young, then my caption, stark and white, gasps rising below, heads turning, her face lifting, frozen. Anger flared, unshakable, at her lies, now bare, shock surging, overwhelming, at their stares, her panic, his shift beside her. I stood, booth shadows stretching, watching her rise, stumble, Ryan bolting for the exit, my hands steady as I pulled the drive, shut it off, the film resuming, my mark made. Sadness hit, persistent, for what I'd done, her secret a spotlight, her comfort gone, a balance I'd shifted my way. I left, not fast, just sure, slipping down the stairs, past Tim's nod, out into the night, driving home, the city a blur beyond the glass. She returned past midnight, steps uneven, keys crashing as she entered, her face pale, eyes red, hands trembling as she gripped the counter. She didn't speak, just stared at me sitting there, photo on the table, her voice breaking, asking how I dared, why, her tone raw, jagged. I stayed firm, eyes steady, saying I'd found out, shown them, let the Regal tell it, my caption true. Anger surged, searing, at her standing there, caught, her secrecy a price she'd pay. She shook her head, frantic, saying it was harsh, ruined her, people pointing, Ryan fleeing, her night shattered. I stepped closer, voice low, telling her she'd built this, 2 months of deceit, her choice, not mine. Shock lingered, from her lies, her plea, sadness deepened, for what we'd been, her coolness a lie I trusted too long. She clutched the counter, voice rising, saying she didn't deserve it, nostalgia wasn't wrong, she'd wanted me back. Anger burned, fierce, at her excuse, her thinking she could reclaim me, her callousness a slap I'd never forget. I didn't bend, saying she'd lost us, her screen moment a truth she'd face. Then a twist struck, a knock, late and firm, I opened it to Lisa, Sarah's friend, eyes wide, phone out. She'd been there, seen it, filmed it, the photo, my words, the crowd's reaction, now online, spreading fast. My chest tightened, resolute, at her proof, a ripple I hadn't planned. She didn't speak, just played it, video shaky, Sarah's face mid-frame, Ryan's beside her, my caption clear, gasps audible. Shock flared overwhelming at Lisa's move, her making it public, a witness I hadn't sought. Anger steadied deep at Sarah's lies, now everywhere, sadness settled aching for her shame, her affair a mark I'd set for all to see. I turned, Lisa gone facing Sarah, her hands empty, eyes locked on me, coolness broken, voice trembling as she asked why again, softer, defeated. I stayed steady, saying she'd chosen this, hid it, thought I'd stay silent, voice low, final, letting her feel it, a scream, a divorce, her nothing left. She sank to a chair, hands over her face, silence falling, heavy with what I'd done. Shock pulsed, anger burned, sadness lingered, a storm I carried, fractured yet firm. I didn't waver, stood tall, her photo a shadow, her 2 months a cost she'd bear. Sarah had chased nostalgia, thought I'd stay blind, and I'd struck a step I'd taken, eyes open, into what followed, a story carved here, with a screen I'd claimed. I stood in the living room 2 days after the Regal incident, the air still in the apartment, morning light slanting through the blinds onto the hardwood as I traced the fallout of my revenge, hands steady, coffee cooling on the table. Sarah had stayed, sleeping in the guest room since that night, her presence a fading echo, her world shrunk by what I'd done. Because I'd displayed that photo of her with Ryan on the screen, captioned, I am filing for divorce, you have nothing else, I'd been banned from every cinema in the city, my own photo now hanging at their entrances, a grainy shot from their security, a mark of my act. 11 years had unraveled, her cool lies exposed, her 2-month affair a truth I'd forced into the open, and I'd struck, deliberate and firm, watching it land. Now, as silence settled, I faced the end, ready to close it, not fast, not soft, but steady, my way. I'd carried it all since Stubbs' texts, her voice, through days that stretched heavy, moving through the space like a man reclaiming what was left. Shock had flared first, sharp, relentless, at her betrayal, Ryan's ease, her plea to turn it back. Anger surged fierce, unyielding, driving me to act, to show them, her screen moment a fire I'd lit. Sadness lingered, persistent, deep an ache for what we'd been, her mystery a deception I'd held too long. I'd sat, nights quiet, hands steady, letting it sink, letting it shift me, my balance guiding me through her ruin, my bad a price I'd paid. Revenge had steadied me, her shame public, her affair a spotlight, but now, standing there, acceptance rose, calm, certain, a shore I'd reach alone. That afternoon, I found her, sitting on the couch, lamp off, hands still in her lap, her bag packed, eyes shadowed, her defeat a quiet weight between us. I crossed, boots soft, deliberate, setting the Regal stub on the table, the photo beside it, chair creaking as I sat, not close, just there, gaze steady, letting the moment settle. She looked, slowly, eyes meeting mine, hollowed out, a question I'd answer my own way. Shock lingered, from her lies, her screen shame, but anger simmered deep at her secrecy, her thinking I'd stay blind. I didn't rush, just leaned back, hands relaxed, letting her see, letting her feel the end I'd carved. She shifted, hands clenching, breath uneven as she sat there, her coolness gone, her voice a whisper when she asked what now, her tone flat, resigned. I saw it unfold, her at the Regal, Ryan near, 2 months of them, then her plea, her lies, her fall under that screen. Sadness swelled, profound, for what we'd been, her past a pull, her present with me a lie I trusted. Anger flared, unshakable, at her keeping it, her chasing him, her thinking I'd let it pass. I didn't soften, voice low, saying I'd filed, it was over, she'd pushed it to this, my bad a mark I'd wear, her nothing left a truth she'd live. Acceptance settled a calm as I spoke, a clarity I'd found, steady still, but free. Then a twist emerged, she reached, slowly, into her bag, pulling a cinema ticket, not a stub, full, dated 2 months back, crumpled, kept. She set it down, hands trembling, beside the photo, a keepsake she'd held, a first night with Ryan I hadn't known. Shock hit overwhelming at her clinging to this, her hiding it even now. Anger surged, searing, at her thinking it mattered, her lapse a choice she couldn't erase. Sadness deepened, aching for what it showed, her nostalgia a trap, her life with me a lie I'd believed too long. I didn't take it, just left it, hands firm, her gesture a thread I'd snap, her ticket a past I'd leave behind. I turned, gaze steady, facing her, letting her see, letting her feel the finality I'd reached. She didn't love me, didn't want this, just wanted him, then me, then nothing, and I'd ended it, screen lit, divorce filed, her rush a price she'd pay. Acceptance held, quiet, a tide I'd ride alone. I didn't falter, stood tall, her photo a shadow, his voice a ghost, my path a line I'd drawn, clear and sure. I grabbed my keys and crossed to the door. She sat, motionless, bag a marker of her fall, ticket a truth I'd outgrown. I stopped, hand on the knob, back to her, letting the moment hang, heavy, done. Shock had faded, anger cooled, sadness settled, acceptance rose, a journey I'd walked, fractured yet firm. I didn't turn, door clicked shut, stepped out, night open, a place I'd reached, alone but certain, her nothing left, a mark I'd set, my ban a badge I'd carry, a story sealed here, with a screen I'd claimed. The days since her exit blurred, distraction seeping in, my focus slipping from old habits as I moved through the rooms, hands steady but restless, adjusting to a space now fully mine. Shock had dulled, anger had eased, sadness had softened, acceptance had emerged, a path I traveled since those stubs surfaced, her texts revealed, his voice confirmed. I'd rearranged, methodical, shifting furniture, clearing shelves, my life a framework I'd redefined without her shadow. Her ticket, her plea, her last look lingered unspoken, distant, nudging me to look outward, to the city beyond the glass, its pulse a draw I'd ignored too long. I'd grown, distracted from her echo, finding purpose in small shifts, coffee brewed slow, books reordered, a silence I'd shaped for myself. She'd vanished, no calls, no trace, her silence a mirror to mine, my words still toward her, my thoughts drifting to what I'd overlooked. I'd seen her watchful as ever, her cool reserve, her hidden nights, and acted, steady and certain, her affair a truth I'd laid bare, my ban a price I'd embraced. Growth crept in firm, subtle, not in bold strides, but quiet steps. I'd kept the apartment, repainted a wall, claimed her old desk, settling into a space I'd make my own, bare floors now familiar, wide windows framing a view I'd come to know. I'd adjusted, tools hung, books stacked, distracted by the rhythm, building a life solo, my hands calm as I set out maps of places I'd yet to explore. Work deepened, hours stretched, attention honed, a distraction I welcomed, growing broader, a man who'd shed her weight. That first month alone, distraction guided me, my gaze catching sights I'd missed, a deli's chatter, a bench's calm, the city vibrant beyond my former frame. Sadness lingered, an ache for what we'd had, her mystery a pull I'd followed too far, but it lightened, a memory I'd let rest. Anger had dimmed, her secrecy, her nostalgia replaced by a quiet resolve, a growth forged in letting go. I'd stopped dwelling, distracted by the present, cooking dishes I'd never tried, reading late into the night, tracing streets I'd mapped alone. Acceptance solidified, calm, unwavering, a truth I'd carved, I trusted too readily, missed her shift, struck when I saw, and stood stronger for it, a man who'd learned to redirect, to grow beyond her pull. One evening, weeks later, I walked boots firm on concrete past the Regal, its marquee bright, my photo small at the door, a reminder of my choice. I didn't linger, just glanced, gaze steady, noting the ban, the mark, a cost I'd shouldered without regret. Shock had flared at her lies, her plea anger had fueled me to light that screen as sadness had pressed for what I'd lost, but acceptance anchored me, a quiet close I'd reached, distracted by new currents, growing into someone I'd come to know. The city sprawled, floors of lives, streets alive, and I felt its draw, a life I'd shape, steady, alone, my focus reclaimed. Then an unexpected moment struck outside a corner shop, dusk falling, air cool. Lisa stepped from a cab, Sarah's friend, eyes meeting mine, phone in hand, that video a silent bridge between us. She paused, gaze level, nodding once, her quiet a presence I hadn't sought. I stood, hands in pockets, watching her stop, then speak, voice clear, saying Sarah had left the city, gone west, her life upended after the Regal. Shock pulsed, brief, at her departure, her rush with Ryan a past she'd escaped. Sadness settled light for her ruin, her coolness a cost she'd borne alone. Growth steadied firm as I nodded back, distracted by the update, accepting it, a piece I'd let fade, a man who'd moved past her trace. Lisa's words dissolved, Sarah's silence endured, no tether left, no word shared, my growth a quiet strength, distraction a compass. I'd learned trust was selective, her secrecy a lesson, my revenge a line I'd set, my ban a sign I'd carry. A high-rise remained, mine now, a frame I'd reshape, steady hands building a life I'd own. Work grew, focus sharper, nights filled with reading, walks, a rhythm I'd claimed, distracted from her echo, growing into someone broader, alone but certain. I stopped, street calm, city alive around me, hands steady, gaze clear, letting it settle, a life I'd forged, her nothing left, a truth I'd marked, my ban a badge I'd earned. Shock had passed, anger had faded, sadness had eased, acceptance stood, a path I'd taken, fractured then firm. I didn't look back, moved forward, streets open, a man who'd grown, distracted by the now, steady in the quiet, a story closed here, with a screen I'd left behind.